Despite my undying love for Battle Network, I've actually never played any of the Mega Man Star Force games. So when they announced the Legacy Collection, I knew it was the perfect time to finally complete them. And I do mean complete. Like with the other Mega Man collections, I knew that I was going to go for the 100% achievements in the form of the Platinum Trophy. Much like what I did with the Battle Network series, I also thought it would be a fun little thing to rank each game in the collection based on how difficult their achievements/trophies are relative to each other. Now, very quick admin before we get to the ranking. Some trophies can either be done in any of the games or count objectives across all the games. As an example, you need to complete 30 help quests, but you can do those 30 across all 3 games. How I'm going to deal with this, just for the sake of the ranking, is by ignoring them basically. It wouldn't be fair to mark one game as harder just because I chose to do that trophy in that one. So we're ranking the game-specific trophies, and with that in mind, let's kick off the ranking with... Star Force 1 is pretty handily the easiest trophy-wise, and probably just in general as well. And there's a pretty clear reason for that. There's only 4 trophies specifically for Star Force 1, and 2 of them are main story related. I personally ended up naturally getting a lot of the miscellaneous ones in this game as well, such as selecting 6 cards in one turn or doing 5 counters in one battle. So by the time I was done with it, I actually did have about a third of the trophies. Obviously they don't factor into the ranking, but it's still pretty neat and makes me wonder if they designed the list with that intention. I mean, probably not, right? But it's still pretty cool if so. So what about the other 2 non-story Star Force 1 trophies? What are they? Well, one is for beating the post-game story, which we'll get to in a little bit, and the other one is for getting the Lonely Heart item. Is this item hard to get? No, not really. It's out of the way, and without a guide you're unlikely to stumble into it as you need to follow an invisible pathway to get to its location. But it's not like there's a hard fight or anything blocking it off, it's just talking to an NPC. That leaves the post-game story, which in this game needs you to reach the end of Deep Space, which only unlocks after beating the game. The main things stopping you are some doors needing extra requirements. Specifically, these are for defeating all the SP bosses and getting all 150 standard cards in the game. To start with, the SP bosses only spawn in after defeating the EX bosses. The EX bosses are in static locations that you can talk to normally, while the SP forms are random spawns on that same map, barring the few that you can talk to over and over again to get all 3 forms easily. The 150 standard cards are mostly dropped from defeating enemies at a high rank. Probably would be a pain if you were searching for all these yourself, but the games are very well documented. Personally, I use the rockman.exe zone for all the games for things like enemy and card locations, information on the ranking system, and so on. At the end of the post-game story, you have to defeat your version's Guardian, who is a bit harder than in the story, but still not too hard, right? And certainly not as difficult as later games' harder foes. So is that all? Everything in the game? Not quite. You see, there's 3 trophies in the collection that need you to collect all cards in all 3 games. One for standard cards, one for mega cards, and one for giga cards. As these need you to fully complete a task in each of the games and not do some in one and some in another, I decided to count the card collection for each game as part of the ranking. I've already mentioned the standard and the giga cards are actually completely fine. There's only 5 of them, and you'll come across most of them by the time you finish the post game. Some are expensive, but now's probably a good time to talk about the new modifiers in the Legacy Collection. Basically, these make the game easier. I'm not going to pretend I didn't use these just for shortening time grinding or farming. I didn't use them when I was doing something new, but if I was just farming cards or money, then yeah, I'm going to turn on the 5 times Zenny rewards and the 5 time buster damage and the 100% damage reduction just to make it quicker and easy. The crucial one for making standard and mega card farming easier is the encounter rate one. If you set it to max, it instantly triggers a battle, which increases how often you see enemies and thus how often you receive drops. But what are mega cards? I haven't focused on them yet. These are dropped from bosses. There's 3 tiers of each, a normal, an EX and an SP version. Which one drops from the boss generally depends on what rank you get. I would aim for rank 7 for the regular tier, 9 for EX, and S for SP. Again, Rockman EXE Zone has a great page on how the scoring for the ranking works, so I'd really recommend checking that out if you want to know more about it. Basically, all the card collection stuff I mentioned here is relevant to the other 2 games as well, and speaking of the other games...
Megaman Man Star Force 2, Zerger Saurian.
Star Force 2 is apparently pretty consensually agreed upon to be the weakest of the Star Force games from my very brief bit of research online. My only input into that topic is that the encounter rate felt way higher than the other games. Don't know if it actually is, but it felt like it. But thankfully the Legacy Collection lets you turn down or off the encounters if they start getting annoying, which you absolutely should not feel bad about doing. It's a quality of life change, you're allowed to use it. I think I'll start with the card collection this time, as there's really not much different from the first game. Standard and Giga cards are almost the exact same process as the first game, and Mega cards, the only thing to really note on them is there's now 42, up from the 30 in Star Force 1. When it comes to unique trophies for Star Force 2, we actually have some things to talk about this time. To start with, the post-game is harder, with some unique bosses rather than just the repeats. And yes, they also drop Mega Chips, so you'll need to fight harder versions of them too. At least they respawn in static locations after pulsing out. You also need to collect all 9 wallpapers. These are mostly just a case of interacting with certain objects like your friend's PC monitors. A few of these need to be bought from shops, and a couple are for doing help quests for Sonya and Amy. Sonya just needs you to pick the correct options, and Amy needs 3 cards that you'll likely have, and if not, they aren't hard to get. They're all like tier 1. Next up, you need to get the BM Blaster. This is a Battle Network tie-in side quest, which in the original version, I think you probably had to have Battle Network in the GBA slot of the DS. Basically, you need to find 5 data piles with data entries around the map, and these contain Lan's diary. You just gotta read them, and then Lan sends you an email with the weapon. The last 2 specific to Star Force 2 are connected. First, you need to save 3 best combos. This is a system that I really didn't interact with outside of the achievement. You need to be fighting an EX or SP boss and then select and use at least 3 cards before the enemy moves from the tile it's on. How I did this is fight the crab guy, hit him with the stun gun, and then use white cards like panel or stage changes that don't do damage but still count towards the combo. I just filled my deck with a ton of those really. After getting at least one of these, you can go to the cinema where there'll be a guy that will make a legend card for the final trophy exclusive to the second game. Now this last section is trophies that can be gotten either Star Force 2 or 3. I did decide to include these in the ranking, but just keep in mind I took them into account for both 2 and 3 as far as the ranking goes. So they've only affected these games being harder than Star Force 1 and not really impacted the ranking against each other. Make sense? We cool? Cool. The first of these is for saving a total of 30 Mr. Hertz in battle. These, I think, are just random encounter variants where you need to defeat the enemies without hitting the friendly dude. Annoyingly, your auto lock-on cards will hit him, which is really annoying and should never have been the case. Next up is to use a hidden input command in battle. Now you might be thinking, the heck does that mean? And I agree with you. I can tell you how I got it, but not why. I used the card Double Stone and held left as the screen darkened to spawn them in, and it worked. Again, not sure why, I don't know exactly what the command did, but it's all good, it worked out. Last one is for rolling up 2 obstacles with a snowball card. Easiest way I could think of to get this is against the Nessie boss, as it spawns 2 rocks as part of its boss fight, so you just wait for them to line up and then use the snowball to hit them both for the trophy. And that leads us to the last game, which is of course
Megaman Star Force 3, Red Joker.
Star Force 3 has the most trophies unique to it, and while that doesn't necessarily mean it's the hardest, you'd bet on it if you heard that, wouldn't you? A lot of them are to do with the new noise mechanic, which is only in this game, and to be upfront, I did not have a Scooby-Doo how this worked for the vast majority of my playtime. It was only once I got down to absolutely needing to engage with it that I looked up how it works, and yeah, with the info in front of me, it's not complicated. You just hit things with non-elemental cards to make the numbers go up. I imagine that I skipped over a tutorial at some point, maybe that's on me. We'll loop back around to the noise trophies in a bit, but I do just want to go over the game's card collecting first, which does play out the same as the others, but for whatever reason the standard cards just were not cooperating in this game for me. It felt like it took me absolutely ages to get certain cards, like Jet Attack 3 specifically took me so many battles. In the other games the Giga cards weren't actually much of an issue, but leave it to Star Force 3 to change that. One of them is for doing a random help quest, not difficult but a random location for it. Another is behind a gate that needs you to win 500 battles. This was actually the last thing I needed to do in the game. 500 battles is a lot, and even after I got everything else, I was still a good amount off, probably at least 100. Really annoying. The third that's a pain is from the noise fragment trader for 30 noise frags. There's also a trophy for getting 30 frags, but you actually need to get 45 as there's a standard there for 15 that you also need to get. So how do you get noise frags? Well, it's pretty simple. You just need to win battles with over 100% on the noise meter, and then you get one of a selection of items from a drop table, only one of which is the frag you want. The other items are generally other cards, some of which are illegal cards, which thankfully aren't counted for the library, and you need to get 30 illegal cards anyway for the trophies. This is all dependent on luck, but you can actually increase your chances by getting an S rank at 300% or higher on the noise meter. If you do this, you get 3 drops instead of just the 1. This is admittedly quite difficult to do against normal mobs, but on V3 bosses it's much easier. I just fought Spade on the roof over and over again and was able to get as high as 500%. Useful too, as there's also a trophy that needs you to change into your special form while at 500%. I never got close in the main game, but while farming I did it really easily. You also need to get a noise hand bonus, which is to do with noise card bonus abilities. I guess these were physical cards you'd scan back in the day, but in the collection you can just apply them whenever you want. You need to do a certain set of them for the bonus. I assume this is to do with hands in poker, like Royal Flush or whatever, but I don't know the rules of poker. A Galaxy Advance is basically a program advance from Battle Network. You pick 3 specific cards and then they'll digivolve into a stronger one. I just used 3 normal cannons. You start with that. You need to activate Star Chance mode with a trader for another trophy. Best I can tell, this is also completely random. You just keep giving it cards until you get it. What else is random is finding an Omega boss. These are extra strong versions of the bosses, and the sign they're around is that special music starts playing. The problem is that you only have a 1 in 64 chance of the music playing. The route I used to check is start in Echo Ridge, then go to Alohaha, to the Orbital Base, to the Satella Police Base, and then repeat. And even once you get the music, you aren't actually guaranteed to get the enemy you want. I read the number 6 out of 16 to get the Omega boss, and if you don't get it on the random warning message, the music stops and it's back to grinding out to get the music again. I know all RPGs have random chance-based things, but this game's trophies really put them front and center in a way that the other 2 didn't. Final one for Star Force 3 is for defeating Acid Ace and Dread Joker's strongest forms in the post-game area. They're strong and all, but not really different enough to spend a lot of time on here. Oh, and since I mentioned the post-game, this game's one is really monotonous. It's a lot of going to the new area, then leaving to find the R bosses, which are just refights against the game's bosses, and then back to the new area, and then oh, you're in another gate, you gotta go back and find the bosses again. It's repetitive, and I wasn't a fan of it. Despite the more negative tone I think I've taken with this game, I would say that I do like Star Force 3 a good amount. It might even be my favorite, but boy, I'm not going to 100% it again. This game took me about 30 hours, while the first 2 took about 24 hours each, and that's not a substantial amount of time longer, but it felt longer, you know? I do think that Star Force 3 more than earns its place at the top of the list. And that's the video. Have you gone for the 100% of achievements for the Legacy Collection? And if so, do you agree with my ranking? Let me know all that and more in the comments, and while you're down there, why not like and subscribe? It's free, helps me and the video out, and subscribing also makes it easier for you to see all my videos, both old and new. I did the same thing for the Battle Network games that you'll probably like if you made it this far. I did find these games significantly easier to 100% than Battle Network. Whether that's because they're actually easier or just because I was prepared for it after the last 6 games, I'll leave that for you to decide. One thing that definitely helped is that you don't have to play every version of all the games. You don't have to play all 3 versions of Star Force 1 or anything like that. You just pick one version and you can stick with it and you're good. Thank you for watching this video to the end. For now though, I'm off, hunt them troves, and I'll see you next time.